I was 10 when I first tried to speak up. There wasn't anything obvious I could point to. No big moment, no shouting, no bruises. Just this quiet ache in my chest whenever Sophia walked into the room. Something about her smile felt too practiced, too perfect, like it had sharp edges tucked underneath. I didn't have the words back then, but I knew how I felt. Uncomfortable. Unwelcome. So I told my dad, in the most careful way I could. He didn't even look up from his coffee. Sophia, of course, made it a performance. She laughed softly like I'd just said something adorably silly. "She's jealous," she told him, smoothing her skirt and resting a hand on his arm. "She's struggling with the attention shift. It's normal." And just like that, my warning became a tantrum, a phase, a problem to ignore. Dad nodded along, eyes tired. He wanted peace, not truth. Lucas didn't say much. He never did. He was a few years older and already living in his headphones and basketball games. I think he didn't know where to stand, so he chose nowhere. That left me alone in a house where everyone believed I was the issue. From that moment on, I was labeled the difficult one, the moody kid. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started believing them. They called it jealousy, but what I saw was something they refused to see. It changed the way I moved through that house. I stopped speaking unless I had to. I memorized the creaks in the floorboards so I could avoid being noticed. Every time I opened my mouth, Sophia found a way to twist it. "You see?" she'd say with a soft sigh. "She's always looking for a fight." And my father, he didn't fight for me. Not once. He just looked tired. Always tired. Like defending me would cost more energy than pretending everything was fine. I started journaling around that time. I didn't even realize it was a kind of survival. I'd hide under my covers with a flashlight and write down everything. The way Sophia's smile never reached her eyes. The way she always had to be touching my dad when I was in the room. The things she whispered when no one else was around. I wrote it all down, like if I kept track of the truth, it might matter one day. Like I could prove I wasn't imagining it. But nobody asked for my side. Not my teachers, not my relatives, not even Lucas. When we were younger, we used to team up for everything. Bike rides, secret snacks, even inside jokes. But after Sophia came in, he started pulling away. Maybe it was easier to float in the middle than take a side. Or maybe he just didn't want to believe it either. And me? I just started to disappear. Not physically, but in all the ways that mattered. Looking back, I wonder how different things might have been if just one person had believed me. One adult, one sibling, one someone. But instead, I was the girl with the attitude problem. The one who couldn't adjust. The one who always had something to say, even when I tried so hard to stay quiet. Sophia didn't have to raise her voice to win. She just had to smile at the right people, at the right time. And I had already been framed as the villain in a story I didn't write. I remember this one afternoon, school pickup. I got into the car and barely said a word. Sophia turned to my dad and said, "See? That energy again." Like my silence was an attack, like my presence needed to be fixed. And my dad? He didn't even look at me. He just sighed and turned up the radio. That moment still clings to me. The hum of static, the buzz of the engine, the feeling of being erased while still breathing. They said I was jealous, that it was natural, that I just needed time. But I wasn't jealous. I was alert. I felt something none of them wanted to feel. And for that, they shut the door on me, locked it, tossed the key. They said it was envy, but what I saw was something they refused to see. By the time I turned 18, I didn't pack bags. I packed silence. I left without yelling, without slamming doors, without one final confrontation. I just stopped asking for space in a house that never gave it to me. No dramatic goodbye, just a note on the counter and the weight of finally choosing myself. I remember the morning light hitting the driveway as I walked away. It felt like stepping out of a story I never asked to be part of. Freedom wasn't instant. It was awkward at first, lonely even. I worked late shifts, shared tiny apartments with strangers, and lived on instant noodles and overthinking. But for the first time, I could breathe without walking on eggshells. Therapy helped. Slowly. My therapist said something once that stuck. Not being believed can shape you more than the truth itself. And she was right. I had spent years swallowing my own instincts. Learning to trust them again took everything. I graduated a little later than most of my classmates, but when I did, I stood there in my cap and gown and let myself cry. Quietly, in the bathroom stall before the ceremony. Not because of the degree, but because I had done something for me, for the version of myself they never let exist. That moment, standing in the mirror, mascara smudged, felt like meeting myself for the first time. The girl they tried to silence had a voice now, and she wasn't leaving. I didn't talk to my family for years. No calls, no birthdays, no messages. At first, it hurt more than I expected. I kept checking my phone like maybe someone would reach out, like maybe they'd finally see me. But silence became easier with time. I built my own life, brick by brick, one small win at a time. I made friends who didn't ask me to shrink. I learned what love was supposed to feel like. Safe, not strategic. Sometimes I'd walk past families at the park or see siblings laughing in cafes and feel this hollow pinch in my chest. I used to think I was broken, that maybe I wasn't built for closeness. But therapy helped me see the difference between being guarded and being wise. My boundaries weren't walls, they were protection. And the more I honored them, the more I realized I wasn't the difficult one. I was the only one willing to ask the hard questions. Then one morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer. It was my aunt, someone I barely spoke to growing up. Her voice was softer than I remembered. She told me my dad was sick, that it might be time to come home, just to see him. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, caught between everything I'd run from and everything I'd become. I didn't rush into it. I let days pass. Then a week. I'd stare at the message from my aunt and rehearse 100 versions of what showing up might feel like. Would he even care? Would I care if he didn't? But something tugged at me. Maybe curiosity, maybe unfinished business. I booked a train ticket without telling anyone. No dramatic posts, no updates, just a quiet decision between me and the part of me that still wanted answers. The house looked smaller when I pulled up. Or maybe I'd just grown too far to fit inside it the way I once did. The doorbell felt unfamiliar under my finger. Sophia didn't answer, thank God. It was Lucas. He looked older, tired, thinner, but still carried that air of someone who never wanted to be involved. He stepped aside without a word. And there I was again, standing in the doorway of a family I no longer recognized, heart thudding like a warning. I had learned how to bury the past. Learned how to pack it neatly into boxes and stack it in the attic of my memory. But something about that house, that air, that silence, it cracked something open. The past didn't stay buried. It had a pulse of its own. And now, it was about to unbury itself. It started with a comment. Small, offhand, like most disasters do. We were in the kitchen after dinner, everyone still picking at dessert. Sophia mentioned a trip Lucas had taken a few years back. Oh, when he went to the lake alone, she said casually, pouring herself another glass of wine. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right. Because I remembered that trip. And I remembered Lucas telling me he hated going places alone. I let it go at first, or at least I pretended to. But the thought clawed at me all night. The next morning, I brought it up to Lucas. Just a light comment. Nothing serious. Weird you went solo back then. He blinked, paused too long, then shrugged. Needed space, he mumbled, but I saw the way his eyes flicked to Sophia across the room. That twitch of panic, and suddenly my stomach turned the way it used to when I was 10, that cold, heavy knowing. So I watched, quietly, carefully, the way I used to, noticing patterns, timelines, stories that didn't line up. Sophia's phone was always locked, but Lucas's, sloppier, slower. One day, he left an old iPad charging in the living room. No passcode, and the clouds have a way of keeping things you think are long gone. Photos, messages, audio clips, I didn't even have to look hard. It was all there, right there. Years of it. There were messages, hundreds of them. Some old, some recent, some playful, others graphic. I remember my hands shaking, scrolling in disbelief. They weren't just having an affair. They had built a world together, hidden in plain sight, layered with inside jokes and code names and photos I wish I could unsee. I felt like I was choking on smoke, watching a fire I'd sensed all my life finally reveal its flames. The worst part? It had started when I was a teenager. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront them right then and there. But something in me held back. Maybe it was the little girl who had learned that truth meant nothing unless you had proof in hand. So I saved everything. Every file, every date. I printed copies, sent backups to an encrypted drive, even took screenshots with timestamps. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. I needed to be prepared for the storm I knew would come when I finally spoke. And during all of that, I kept smiling. I sat at the dinner table with them. I listened to Sophia tell stories. I let Lucas pretend he was still my brother. But inside, something was unraveling. I didn't feel betrayed by strangers. I felt gutted by the people I had spent a lifetime trying to love. People who once told me I was just being dramatic, overly sensitive, jealous. And now, with the truth laid bare in front of me, all I could think was, no one believed me. And I was right. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, holding the truth in both hands, wondering how loud the fall would be. I kept picturing their faces, my father's mostly. He was old now, softer in his ways, but still the man who once looked past me like I was invisible. Would he finally see me? Or would he cling to denial like a shield? I wasn't sure. But I was done protecting their comfort at the cost of my sanity. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the next few days pretending, laughing when I had to, nodding at family gossip, hugging relatives I barely knew. But underneath it all, I was planning. Quietly, methodically. Just like they had hidden their betrayal, I was preparing my reveal. I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. I wanted them to hear my voice echo in a room they once kept me silent in. And I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices. All of it. They called it jealousy, an overreaction, a phase. But what I had felt all those years ago wasn't envy. It was warning. A quiet scream no one had the courage to hear. And now, after years of being labeled the problem, I had their secrets in my hands, and this time, I wasn't going to whisper. I planned the dinner with care, not bitterness, precision. A milestone celebration for my father's birthday, one of those cozy family gatherings where everyone wears their best masks. I booked the private room at his favorite restaurant, sent invitations, chose the wine Sophia liked, the dessert Lucas always bragged about. I even smiled while doing it. The whole thing was a performance, and I was finally the one writing the script. They arrived glowing. Sophia wore emerald, all polished confidence. Lucas came late, as always, acting like the night was just another stage for his charm. My father looked older than I remembered, thin, frail, but happy to be surrounded by his family. And there I was, watching it all unfold like a play I'd already seen 100 times, only this time I wasn't just the quiet girl in the corner. I had something to say, and everyone was about to hear it. Dinner was lovely. Laughter, wine, compliments passed like a tray of hors d'oeuvres. But I waited. I waited until dessert, until their guards were down and their stomachs were full. Then I stood up, gently tapped my glass, and smiled. Every eye turned to me. I cleared my throat and began with warmth, a daughter honoring her father. A toast. A moment of gratitude. But beneath my voice, something sharp waited, carefully unsheathing itself, word by word. I wanted to share something tonight, I said, keeping my voice steady. Something I've held for years. The room quieted, forks lowered. Sophia's eyes narrowed just slightly, enough to let me know she felt it coming. Lucas looked bored, picking at the edge of his plate. I reached into my bag and placed a small stack of booklets on the table, one in front of each guest. It's called Not Jealous. Just right, I said. And it's about truth. They flipped through in confusion at first. Then silence. Pages of messages, dates, screenshots, photos, everything. The affair, the years of deception, the timelines that matched their lies. Sophia gasped. Lucas stood up fast, knocking over his chair, his face pale as if all the oxygen had left the room. "This is insane," Sophia said, her voice cracking. But it was too late. The silence had shifted. Eyes were no longer on me. They were on them. I looked at my father. His fork had slipped from his hand. He wasn't speaking, just staring, at the pages, at Sophia, at Lucas. I didn't move. I let him feel it. Let him sit in the silence I had lived with for most of my life. "You said I was jealous," I said, my voice soft now. "That I was making things up. But I was only ever trying to tell you the truth." My heart was pounding, but I felt grounded. This wasn't revenge. This was release. Sophia's face twisted through 5 different expressions: denial, outrage, fear, calculation, and finally, silence. Lucas stormed out, muttering something under his breath, unable to face what he couldn't spin. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. The room was still, heavy with the weight of what had been said, what had been proven. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, eyes wide, lips parted but no words coming. For once, no one interrupted me. I took my seat again without drama, like the performance was over. But I wasn't performing. I was simply done hiding. Around me, whispers started to rise, confused glances passed between guests. Someone gently closed their booklet like it might catch fire. But I stayed calm. I sipped my water. I looked around that room full of people who once believed I was the problem, and I let the silence do what it never did for me: speak. They silenced me as a child, brushed me off, shut me down. But now, I had handed them a megaphone and filled it with every truth they told me didn't matter. And deep down, I think every single one of them knew. The little girl they ignored had grown up, and she had finally been heard. After the dinner, everything changed, though not in the ways they expected. My father didn't say much that night, but the next morning, I got a message from my aunt. He'd told Lucas not to come back, said he couldn't look at him the same way. Sophia left that same week, packed her things, tried to spin her exit as noble, dignified. But people talk, and when lies rot long enough in silence, they stink when exposed. The family didn't split. It cracked. I didn't gloat. There was no celebration, no "I told you so." I felt clean, like someone had finally rinsed the years of gaslighting off my skin. For the first time, I stood in the center of the story without being accused of making it up. People who once avoided my eyes now sent quiet apologies through glances and small gestures, an extra plate brought to me at dinner, a lingering hug goodbye. They wouldn't say the words, but they knew, and that was enough. A few weeks later, I wrote an article, anonymously. It was about how families label young girls as dramatic instead of intuitive, and how betrayal often comes dressed as authority. I titled it "Family Betrayal Disguised as Discipline." It spread fast. Viral, actually. Shared by therapists, trauma survivors, even teachers. I saw my words quoted on forums, in comments, in reposted screenshots. People didn't know it was me, but I knew, and I had never felt more powerful. Eventually, the truth started to outgrow even the walls of our family. Somehow, someone pieced it together. Maybe it was a cousin who recognized a phrase from the article. Maybe it was someone Lucas had bragged to in confidence. But word got out. Whispers turned into confirmation. People who once praised Sophia and Lucas for being so close began to back away. You could see the shift in the way they were greeted, or, more accurately, not greeted at all. Sophia tried to control the story. She gave an interview, subtle, of course, framing herself as a misunderstood woman in a complex situation. She used words like emotional boundaries and complicated love. Lucas? He leaned into the victim role, claimed the past was messy and that nobody knows what really goes on behind closed doors. But by then, the damage was done. Screenshots don't lie, patterns don't disappear, and the internet doesn't forget. Their reputations crumbled, not from hate, but from absence. Invitations stopped coming, emails unanswered, work connections ghosted. Sophia tried to rebrand herself as a wellness coach. Lucas moved to another city. I didn't have to lift a finger. Their downfall was never my mission. It was just the ripple effect of truth finally being allowed to breathe. And in the stillness that followed, I started to feel something I hadn't in years. Safe. People sometimes ask me if I ever regret it, exposing everything like that, and I get it. It made people uncomfortable. It pulled skeletons out of closets that had been locked for decades. But the truth is, I don't regret a second of it. Not the speech, not the article, not even the years of silence that led up to it. Because for the first time in my life, I stopped carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort. I chose mine instead. I still keep one of those booklets in a drawer. Not because I need to reread it, I never do, but because it reminds me that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was just a girl who saw something no one else wanted to see and had the nerve to name it. That kind of truth takes years to grow strong enough to speak. And once you speak it, once you taste what it feels like to finally be heard, you don't go back to whispering. They blamed me for making noise, for disturbing the peace, for dragging shame into the open. But what they never understood is that it wasn't the noise that hurt them. It was the silence breaking. It wasn't my story that ruined their image. It was their story, told too loudly for anyone to ignore.